who takes down the strongest upper moons, and who takes down our favorite Hashira. All of that will be discussed in this video as we break down who killed every Hashira and Demon Moon in Demon Slayer, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Smash that like button if you enjoy seeing these Demon Slayer videos on the channel and want to keep them coming. Make this the video you subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications so you don't miss future Demon Slayer videos and updates. And now without further ado, let's jump into it, spoilers and all. Let's get the ball rolling with Lower Moon 5 Rui. Despite Tanjiro and Nezuko's best efforts, Rui was about to finish them off, but then Water Hashira Giyu shows up. This is one of the biggest flexes in the series. As Rui launches his best attacks, Giyu's facial expressions don't even change. He uses his own created form, Dead Calm, to completely nullify Rui's attacks. Then before Rui can even try another attack, Giyu cuts his head off in the blink of an eye, again without changing expressions. It's almost as if Giyu is bored killing this demon that Tanjiro and Nezuko had so much trouble with, and that is how the Water Hashira killed Lower Moon 5 Rui. After Rui dies, an angry Muzan summons all the lower moons, frustrated with how weak they are. He decides that lower moons are of no use to him and kills Lower Moon 6 Kamanue, followed by Lower Moon 4 Mukago, followed by Lower Moon 3 Wakuraba, and lastly Lower Moon 2 Rokuro. He decides he likes Lower Moon 1 Enmu and gives him an abundance of his blood to make him stronger. So in one fell swoop, Muzan wiped out almost all of the lower moons for us. Next, predictably, comes Lower Moon 1 Enmu's death. This death was less straightforward as Enmu joined bodies with a train. Flame Hashira, Rengoku, Zenitsu, and Nezuko worked on protecting the people on the train, while Inosuke and Tanjiro went for the kill. While Inosuke's attack exposed Enmu's neck train, Tanjiro is the one who delivered the finishing blow to it using Hinokami Kagura, Clear Blue Sky. However, it was definitely a team effort, and while Rengoku and them kept Enmu from absorbing people and getting stronger, Inosuke helped Tanjiro and even saved him when Enmu got Tanjiro to almost take his life for real because he thought he was still in an Enmu-induced dream. Now before we move on to the first Hashira death we'll be discussing, let's wrap up with the lower moons, including the ones from bonus materials. First, let's mention a lower moon I easily forget about because he's not a lower moon by the time we meet him in the series. I'm referring to Lower Moon 6 Kyogai the Drum Demon. He used to be Lower Moon 6 before Muzan stripped him of that title for not being strong enough. Tanjiro is the one who kills him by using water-breathing 9th form, splashing water flow turbulent. Now if you're wondering for this attack, I'm using the official Shonen Jump translation. Tanjiro uses the 9th form because it minimizes landing time and landing area, making it perfect for Kyogai's rotating room. Tanjiro tells Kyogai that his blood demon art is incredible before he cuts off his head, leading the dying demon to ironically shed tears of joy in his final moments. He finally felt like someone admired him after a lifetime of rejection. Now we get to the still canon but bonus material Lower Moon demons. Former Lower Moon 2 Hairo was featured in Kyojuro Rengoku's side story, and not surprisingly, Kyojuro Rengoku was the one to finally end him using the strongest flame-breathing form, 9th form Rengoku, aka Purgatory. In his human form, the demon was a swordsman who got made fun of for sticking to an outdated weapon like a sword by men who used guns. So as a demon, he fights with guns now, thinking they're better automatically. However, since his guns don't beat Rengoku, he finally takes the shape of a giant shadow wolf and tries using a sword against Rengoku. It's not enough, but as Hairo is evaporating, he says that he admires Rengoku's swordsmanship. A part of him is no doubt glad that Rengoku proved that swords are still a viable weapon in the modern age, at least in the Demon Slayer world. And with Hairo's death, Rengoku earned his promotion to Hashira. So we saw the Lower Moon Rengoku had to kill to become a Hashira, but next we have the Lower Moon Sanemi had to kill to become the Wind Hashira. I'm talking about Lower Moon 1 Ubume. Her blood demon art was illusion manifestation. Sanemi was able to escape from her illusions because his friend and fellow Wind style user broke her demon dispelling mirror, which weakened the power of her illusions. Sanemi was able to end her and become a Hashira as a result, but not before she used her illusion powers to kill Sanemi's friend Masachika. Next, let's turn to Kyojuro Rengoku, who met his end in the most epic fashion possible against Upper Moon 3 Akaza. Rengoku's goal was to protect everyone else present, and not only did he succeed in doing that, he genuinely scared Akaza and made the Upper Moon think his own end might be near, even though Rengoku didn't even awaken a Demon Slayer mark. Rengoku was on the offensive. When Akaza got a lethal attack on Rengoku and penetrated his guts with his arm, Rengoku used this to flex and trap Akaza's arm inside. As dawn was approaching, Rengoku summoned what Akaza described as unbelievable power. He used one arm to start cutting Akaza's neck, and the other to hold Akaza's free arm. A freaked out Akaza had no choice but to tear off his arms and run for his life. As he's dying, Rengoku smiles and has time to give Tanjiro important information and a pep talk. He tells him no matter how weak or unworthy you feel, keep your heart burning, grit your teeth, and move forward. If you just curl up in a ball and hide, time will pass you by. It won't stop for you while you wallow in grief. Don't worry over my death, I'm a Hashira. It's my job to shield you junior members. He tells her 3 Demon Slaying amigos that someday they will become Hashira and be the pillars of the Demon Slayer Corps. That's what he believes. He tells them again that he believes in them and dies with a big smile on his face as his mother's spirit tells him he did splendidly. It's Rengoku's death and how he handled it that makes him one of my favorite characters in the entire Demon Slayer series. Next up, let's look at how Upper Moon 6, Gyutaro and Daki met their end. Of course, since both of their necks have to be cut at the same time, this had to be a team effort. Tanjiro does splendidly against Gyutaro. With a sickle stuck in his jaw, Tanjiro keeps swinging. He decides he needs to summon 100 times his usual strength, and the scar on his forehead spreads to look more like Yorichi's as his eyes turn completely white. Similarly to how Rengoku turned Akaza's attack against him, Gyutaro comments that Tanjiro is not letting him pull his sickle out of Tanjiro's jaw. In this awakened demon mark form, Tanjiro succeeds in mustering the strength necessary to cut off Gyutaro's head, while Zenitsu and Inosuke together succeed in cutting Daki's tricky sash-like neck by slashing their swords in opposite directions. Even as Gyutaro and Daki are dying, Gyutaro releases one last attack, but luckily our guys all survive. As they are evaporating, at first Gyutaro and Daki are upset with each other. Tanjiro, after beating Gyutaro, steps in and tells them that as brother and sister they shouldn't talk like that and should stick together until the end. And they do eventually take his advice as they make up and enter the flames of the other world together. Now of course, Sound Hashira Tengen helped during this fight too, as did his wives at times and even Nezuko. But it was Tanjiro who landed the finishing blow and who must get the credit for killing Gyutaro, while Zenitsu and Inosuke get the credit for taking down Daki. Next up, we have Upper Moon 5 Gyoko, who met his end at the 14-year-old Mist Hashira's hands. This was a significant feat because a Hashira managed to solo an Upper Moon for the first known time. After activating his Demon Slayer Mark power-up, Muichiro was significantly stronger and faster than Gyoko. Gyoko even unveiled his final form, which was supposed to be tougher than diamonds and which allowed him to turn everything he touched into fish, like a fishy Midas touch. However, he couldn't land any hits on a Demon Slayer Mark Muichiro, even if the latter was poisoned. Muichiro ends up being so fast that he cuts Gyoko before the latter even realizes what happened. He even thinks to himself, what's happening? Why is everything upside down? Not realizing it's because Muichiro had already cut off his head. The narrator explains that Muichiro used the 7th form of mist breathing to defeat Gyoko, a technique that uses wildly fluctuating speed to confuse one's opponent. When you show yourself, you move as slow as a turtle, but when you're hidden, you move in the blink of an eye. Its top speed is even faster than Gyoko. Even the narrator has to admit that this was indeed an incredible turn of events that an already injured Muichiro defeated an Upper Moon. And as Gyoko is evaporating, he still won't shut up, questioning how he could lose to a mere human and how everyone is an ungrateful maggot, and so on and so on. Finally, Muichiro can't take it anymore and cuts up the already evaporating head, saying that's enough, just go to hell already. It really hypes up Muichiro, who did so well against Upper Moon 5 after Tengen, Tanjiro, and everyone else struggled so much against weaker Upper Moons, Gyutaro and Daki. Next, we gotta turn to Upper Moon 4 Hantengu's death, which was yet another team effort, but Tanjiro gets the kill in the end. Notably, Awakened Mark Mitsuri's role was even more difficult because she had to occupy Zohaku 10, Hantengu's strongest form, all on her own for an extended period of time, so that Tanjiro and the others could deal with the main body's head. It's ironic she arguably did more to contribute to Upper Moon 4's defeat, but the fight ends with her about to be beaten by Zohaku 10 and thus not looking that impressive, while Tanjiro gets the epic moment of glimpsing into the transparent world to see that the real body is in the heart, and then in epic fashion he slices the tiny but strong neck with his bright red blade. At first he thought they won but lost Nezuko because Nezuko kicked him away from her, so he wouldn't choose to protect her from the sun instead of going after the demon who was targeting people. However, she finally gains immunity to the sun and thus it's wins all around. And a lot of people were saying that these demons this season were weaker than Gyutaro, which isn't true, but I get why some people think that and why it feels that way. Because Demon Slayer Mark Mitsuri could hold off Zohaku 10 so well, because Demon Slayer Mark Muichiro completely outclassed Gyoko, and because Tanjiro finished off a constantly running away Hantengu, it just didn't feel quite as satisfying as the Upper Moon 6 fight where they just barely pulled off the win. Akaza's death is an interesting one. Tanjiro and Giyu fought him together, and Tanjiro is the one who temporarily outclassed him when he reached the selfless state, or what Akaza calls the domain of supremacy that he himself has been seeking all this time. Tanjiro even warned him the attack was incoming, and Akaza couldn't react in time and got his head cut off. So it sounds like Tanjiro killed Akaza, right? But that's not the end of the battle. Akaza keeps fighting with a headless body. He begins to change into something different, into a demon like Muzan that can't die through decapitation. It's made clear that Tanjiro and Giyu are out of energy. Tanjiro even drops his sword from exhaustion, so it looks like Akaza, who's regrowing his head, is about to win. But then, with a smile on his face, he self-destructs. A part of it is because he feels like he lost the moment Tanjiro cut off his head, but the more important reason is that he regained his memories, and the spirit of his love, Koyuki, made it possible for him to fight against Muzan's influence. Through her, he was finally able to let go and evaporate. So although you could say that Tanjiro outclassed him and made him suffer a symbolic defeat, Akaza is the one that took his own demon life. Next we have another Hashira, Rumble Hashira Jigoro, Zenitsu Sensei aka Gramps. Like Akaza, Jigoro took his own life when he found out that Zenitsu Senpai and his other student Kaigaku chose to become a demon. Jigoro took it as his own failure and responsibility that one of his students became a demon, so he committed seppuku. Zenitsu found out through a letter and was especially upset because Jigoro didn't have a second to help with the ritual and thus suffered much more than necessary. Zenitsu got more serious than ever before as he decided that he had to avenge his Gramps' death by beating Kaigaku. And now that's the perfect transition to Kaigaku's death. Kaigaku, most likely because there were spots open, became the new Upper Moon 6. Zenitsu fought this thunder-breathing demon moon alone, and he ends up killing him in epic fashion using his own created thunder-breathing form, not to mention the strongest thunder-breathing form, 7th form, Honoi Kazuchi no Kami aka Flaming Thunder God. Yes, that is indeed an epic name. Not only is it cool that it has the word God in the title, it also takes the form of an epic looking giant electric dragon. Kaigaku didn't see it coming. In fact, he even says, "I didn't see that." He says it was so fast, which, keep in mind, is high praise from a demon-enhanced Thunder Breather. Thunder Breath style users are known for their speed after all. At first, Kaigaku takes solace in the fact that at least it looks like Zenitsu is falling to his death as well. However, Yushiro saves him while also rubbing it in the decapitated Kaigaku's face, saying it's a pity to die alone. Kaigaku is left alone to evaporate while Zenitsu's wounds are treated promptly. And so Kaigaku's death coincides with Zenitsu's revenge and his most epic moment in my opinion. Next is Nakime's death, who replaces Hantengu and takes the Upper Moon 4 position, but it feels like an empty title since she had no title when the roles were filled and she is not strong offensively. Nakime ends up being defeated and tricked by the combined efforts of Iguro, Mitsuri, and Yushiro, who takes control of her mind and makes it seem to her and Muzan like she defeated Iguro and Mitsuri. If you know Naruto, it's like a genjutsu illusion. When Muzan finds out what's happening, he uses his power to kill her, but fortunately, Yushiro is able to get them all out of the Infinity Castle before her cells completely die. So not an especially strong Upper Moon or a particularly climactic death, but notably it was accompanied with Yushiro's most epic moment. Now on to Upper Moon 2 Doma's death, one of my favorites, and this one is definitely a team effort. We can't discuss Doma's death without mentioning Flower Hashira Kanae's death and later Insect Hashira Shinobu's death. Let's start with the backstory of Kanae's death. One day, she ran into Upper Moon 2 Doma. She was fatally wounded in this encounter, but the sun was coming up and Doma didn't succeed in absorbing her as he likes to do with women. He had to run away. Shinobu got there before her older sister Kanae died. Kanae wants her sister to live a normal life, but Shinobu insists on being told what demon did this to her. She wants revenge. Seeing how committed Shinobu is, Kanae finally decides to describe Doma to her. Before she dies, she reveals everything she knows about Doma, which Shinobu will use to come up with and execute her master revenge plan. Now back to the main story and the moments surrounding Doma's defeat. Doma was way out of Kano and Inosuke's league. His ice clones alone were a handful for them, so you can bet they would have had no chance in a normal fight against full power Doma. However, as he's about to leave them in the hands of his ice clones, his face starts to fall apart. It's revealed that this is the result of Shinobu's poison and master plan. I personally love well executed and patient revenges in fiction, and this is one of those. For over a year, Shinobu continually took in Wisteria flower poison poison. She was determined to kill the demon that killed her older sister Flower Hashira Kanae. Although she knew from the beginning that her sword couldn't deliver a lethal amount of poison to Doma, she made sure her body would deliver 700 times the normal lethal amount. And yes, 700 is the official number, while the mangaka accidentally put 70 in the weekly shonen magazine. So from the beginning, her plan was to make it look like she's trying to win, but to get absorbed by Doma. And that's exactly how it went down. It takes a while for all of that poison to take effect, but it does. And this is when Kanao takes her chance. She uses one of the coolest breathing techniques, flower breathing final form Vermilion Eye. It stains the eyeballs red because of the pressure it puts on them. It can lead to blindness, but in exchange, the user raises dynamic vision to the utmost and makes surrounding movements look dull and slow. This technique allows her to get close enough to Doma's rotting neck. She starts to cut it, but his ice powers freeze her before she can finish. Then Inosuke uses one of my other favorite techniques, Beast Breathing's Sudden Throwing Strike, which is pretty much him just throwing his swords like ninja stars. The swords reach and push Kanao's sword enough so that it makes it through Doma's rotting neck. Perhaps he was strong enough to regrow his head like Akaza if it wasn't for the poison, but as things stood, Doma simply evaporated. So this battle was definitely a team effort that involved Shinobu, Kanao, and Inosuke, and maybe even Kanae for giving important information to Shinobu, but I'd personally give the most credit to Shinobu for this death. Upper Moon 1's death was another massive team effort. Notably, it involved 3 of the strongest Hashira, Stone Hashira Gyomei, Wind Hashira Sanemi, Mist Hashira Muichiro, as well as Genya. And what I find most impressive about this victory is that everyone played such vital and complementary roles in taking Upper Moon 1 Kokushibo's head. The big shift happened thanks to the strongest Hashira Gyomei. He gained access to the transparent world, a top tier power up, and since Kokushibo also had access to it, Gyomei could use that knowledge to trick Kokushibo. He was able to catch him off guard with a rosary. It hit Kokushibo's hand, and that led to an attack from Sanemi, then the spiked ball taking off his arm, and then Muichiro stabbed him because the rosary changed the trajectory of Kokushibo's attack just enough for Muichiro to just barely dodge and get this vital stab in. Kokushibo even says that Gyomei deceived his eyes by using the knowledge of the transparent world to control his own blood circulation, and in this way, he messed up Kokushibo's attack. Then even non-Hashira Genya plays a role, firing his Upper Moon enhanced Blood Demon Art bullets at Kokushibo. Although Kokushibo tries to deflect, the bullets like living things turned and sank into Kokushibo's body. Then the bullets sprout into tree roots that should help to immobilize Kokushibo and suck Kokushibo's blood, the source of his Blood Demon Art. Kokushibo panics and is able to launch countless crescent blades from his body. They cut the roots, cut Muichiro and Genya, while Sanemi and Gyomei avoid the attacks. Then Muichiro, who only has the top half of his body remaining, is such a boss that he not only holds on to his sword, but turns his sword bright red, the strongest and most effective color against demons. As Kokushibo points out, it creates intense pain, like his insides are on fire. Sanemi attacks, while Genya still has flesh bullets in the Upper Moon's body. More tree roots sprout out, and Kokushibo realizes he can't use a technique, presumably because the roots are sucking his remaining blood, the source of his techniques. Then Gyomei drops his spiked ball on Kokushibo's head, and it's still not enough. Nevertheless, Kokushibo points out that he can't use a technique because the tree in his back is sucking up his blood. His body is seizing up due to the intense pain of Muichiro's red katana. He's dealing with all of this, with Gyomei's spiked ball pushing down on him, and finally, the final piece comes in with Sanemi, who hits down on the spiked ball with his own sword. Both weapons turn red, and the added pressure is enough to finally take off Kokushibo's head. So getting to this point was definitely a team effort. Gyomei started the domino effects with a mere rosary, but everyone played a vital role. However, as with Akaza, decapitation doesn't spell the end for this demon. Kokushibo becomes more monstrous than ever as he regrows his head. Gyomei and Sanemi keep pressing him. Kokushibo even says that he overcame decapitation, and now any kind of attack other than sunlight is meaningless. Just as he's thinking no one can beat him now, he sees his reflection in Sanemi's sword. The monster staring back at him shocks him. He says it's so ugly. He always wanted to be the strongest samurai, but now he questions himself. Is this really how a samurai looks? He asks himself if this is really what he wanted, and at this point, only when he psychologically begins falling apart, his body follows, starting where Muichiro, his descendant, stabbed him. So yes, all 4 of these demon slayers helped take down Kokushibo, but like with Akaza, it seems like Kokushibo played a role in his own death. Like Akaza, psychologically, he no longer had an unpolluted will to fight on, and so his own psychology, it seems clear, is what ultimately contributes to the death of this demon, who, as he himself said, reached a point where nothing but the sun, which wasn't present in the Infinity Castle, could defeat him. But that's not to take away from Sanemi, Gyomei, Muichiro, and Genya. It was because they did so well and pushed him to this point that he became so obviously monstrous, even to himself, and had to face this psychological breakdown. In other words, their efforts led to his death, even if his death was ultimately the direct result of his internal struggle. And just to externalize his internal struggle further, we find out at the end that Kokushibo never let go of his humanity and past, as symbolized by the fact that he kept the flute that his brother gifted him on his person after all these centuries. If he had completely abandoned his humanity, chances are he would have gone on living and killed even Sanemi and Gyomei, not just Muichiro and Genya. So now it makes sense to look at Mist Hashira Muichiro's death. And as with Hashira Shinobu's death and Kanae's death, Muichiro's death was covered while discussing the demon that killed them. Obviously, Kokushibo does end up killing Muichiro. He couldn't survive being cut in half. After Kokushibo evaporates, we see that Muichiro too has now passed on. Gyomei says it's thanks to Muichiro that they won, and that for one so young, he really was magnificent to the end. Muichiro reunites with his twin brother's spirit, and although his brother is upset at first that Muichiro died, Muichiro says he doesn't regret risking his life for his comrades. They finally come to an understanding and have a cathartic hug and cry together. Next, now that all the Upper Moon deaths have been covered, we gotta discuss the Hashira deaths that happened as a result of the Muzan fight. After giant baby Muzan evaporates, we see Gyomei, the strongest Hashira. He fought to the end, and even after losing a leg, continued to pressure giant baby Muzan. But now he's telling them not to waste medication on him. He knows that it's too late for him. He's selfless to the end and tells them calmly to go see to the younger fighters. He says it's his last request. Then he's reunited with the spirits of the children he used to watch over, before they ended up getting killed by a demon. They apologize for that day, the day of the tragedy. They explain that they weren't trying to run away. They wanted to protect Gyomei because he was blind. One says he wanted to go outside for a farming tool to use as a weapon, and another wanted to call for help. Gyomei too is sorry he couldn't protect them. He blamed himself for it for all this time. But the kids tell him not to apologize. They all hug him and tell him they love him. They say they have been waiting this whole time for him. Gyomei is relieved and thanks them. He says, then let's go together, and dies smiling, and of course with tears running down his eyes as usual, but this time they are tears of joy. Next up, we see Mitsuri and Iguro die from the fatal wounds that Muzan inflicted on them. As Mitsuri is dying in Iguro's arms, they confess their love to each other. Mitsuri begs to be Iguro's bride if they're reborn as humans, and he says of course, if she agrees to have him. This time he will make her happy and protect her so she doesn't end up dead. And if you watched my All Secret Romances in Demon Slayer video, you know that they do get their happy ending, and their reincarnations run a family restaurant together. Sanemi almost dies, but the spirit of his father says he can't go yet, aka he can't die yet, and sends him back to the world of the living. He tells him to be thankful he's his son, and so he's extra tough. So by the end, only Sanemi and Giyu of the current Hashira survive, while out of the former Hashira, Tengen, Urakodaki, and Shinjiro survive. Thus, all of these characters presumably get to die of natural causes or just straight up old age. Since Giyu and Sanemi awaken Demon Slayer marks, it's possible, if you want to get dark, to argue that they die by 25. Since that's what happens to most marked ones. But since the demons have been defeated, I think it's fair to assume that the Demon Slayer curse has been lifted as well. Either way, we know that Giyu, Sanemi, and Tengen all live long enough to have kids, and Shinjiro already has Senjuro, as we know, who will live on and have descendants of his own. So that is the death of every Hashira and Demon Moon and who killed them. But what's even crazier is the countless secret romances that take place in Demon Slayer before all the death and sometimes after it. So if that sounds as interesting to you as it does to me, then you won't want to miss my All Secret Romances in Demon Slayer Explained, link on screen right now, and I'll see you there.